Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. This is a comprehensivist Wednesday, and I am delighted to have Harold Nelson back. We did this entire series of meetups on his design way, and he would come and listen to everything. And when people went into breakout rooms, I got to talk to him. So I really miss him, and I'm just delighted that he's back. And he has a new venture. So firstly, Harold, welcome back.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Glad to be back.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
See some familiar faces.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they're all excited about you coming and talking. So it's so let's get started. I know that you have a new venture that you're working on, and you sent me this beautiful article about the roots of the venture back in Berkeley, in the Berkeley bubble. So I think that's the best way of understanding what you're doing, because similar kind of thing was done a long time ago. So, and you were a big part of it. You were a part of it. So what is the Berkeley bubble? Tell us, please.
Yeah. It was a marvelous experience that I just luckily was got to be a part of. I was working as an architect, and I had some big questions that came up that I couldn't answer. So I thought I'd go to graduate school. And when you had big questions, you go to Berkeley. So when I was there, and I went there for an architectural degree, I started attending courses and workshops and then informal gatherings of this interesting group of people, very interesting. And it happened that in, I guess, the latter part of the 50s, early 60s, through the 80s, there was an aggregation of scholars, practitioners, students that all sort of coalesced around a common aspiration. And it was a marvelous example of a self-organizing system, of a self-organizing social system. Nobody mandated it. Nobody told them that they had to form a committee. Nobody said, here's a grant. They just started bonding around this one kind of aspiration that Wes Churchman, who was one of the key people, said was to secure improvement in the human condition. So not every one of the people in this group would say it in the same way, but it had always the same spirit. So this group had influence and attracted interest from well beyond the campus. It was global, and it was, I mean, a great example of how colleagues could work together. They weren't debating ideas, they were having conversations, and they were building on one another's ideas. And it turns out that there were ancestors, of course, to all of these folks that go all the way back to the I Ching and, you know, some of the earliest writings, that the ideas and the influences came through the folks at Berkeley. I got to design my own PhD, and I had to make a case to the academic senate and that, but they said, okay. So I got to pick my faculty, pick my the kind of courses I was going to take, pick where I was going to go. Wes Churchman was my advisor. He said, let's call this the design of social systems. And it was kind of a prototype for the school now that I'm working with. And it turned out to be dramatically different, of course, from anything else on campus. And when I pulled the committee together, they were all people who were quite successful in their own fields or professions, but they were not interdisciplinary, they were not multidisciplinary, they didn't share the same disciplines. What they shared was this passion for finding a way to have deep thinking and prudent action make a difference in the world for people. So as great example of this self-organization, sort of giving yourself a convening authority and to begin to do something that counted, because I don't know if any of you have ever worked in companies or universities or anything, but change is slow and hard, and significant change is impossible. So if they would have waited around for permission, they would have still been waiting, and I would have never had my experience.
Wow.
So
wow. So I mean, this is very, very unusual, isn't it, in the academic world, which is typically siloed. Everybody's trying to protect their own turf. There is very little communication. So the idea of saying that let's do deep thinking and prudent action, and let's secure and improve the human condition. I mean, that operating at that level, I think, makes possible a collaboration, even amongst people who seem different. If they agree at that level, and not just agree in speech, but in their heart, in their actions, if that is what they are, then the network that they produce has a very different shape than what exists today, right?
Yeah, it does. And it was interesting because, I mean, it's sort of a social system, but it wasn't given any boundaries. I mean, it didn't stay within the campus or anything like that. The boundary or the edge was actually the influence. So at what level did the influence reach out, and what direction? So in a way, what my colleagues and I are working on now is a direct lineage of some of the influence that came out of that, and learning some of the lessons from what they had done. I mean, these folks were pretty courageous. I mean, they obviously wound up at Berkeley because they were successful in a field in their own disciplines, very successful. But they took a dramatic, different approach to their careers, and they took a lot of heat for that. I mean, the colleagues, the departments were not always happy about what they were doing. And there was a lot of course, the disciplines try to protect their turf by absorbing things like systems. Oh yes, we do systems. Yeah, we do systems. And they'll pull it in, or they'll create a interdisciplinary or something like that to say, yeah, we don't need this extra thing. So I had to admire them. They were very courageous, very good, and they made an incredible impact on a lot of people. The problem, of course, was the times were changing. And while I was there, this person, Ivan Boesky, came and gave a talk to the business school, and he essentially told everybody, it's okay to be greedy. It's good to be greedy. He became famous or infamous for having said that. And it was the time started to shift from kind of a humanitarian focus to more technology, to more kind of finance and product and service development, that kind of thing. The era that was called Revenge of the Nerds, so that technology sort of started to take over, and a lot of that, what was going on campuses and things, that the focus on service, on products, on that sort of thing, especially for the designers. So anyhow, what I wanted to do, and what my colleagues and I have tried to do, and others, is sort of keep some of the spirit of what was started at the Berkeley bubble alive, and bring it back with some vitality. And we learned a lot. I learned a lot going through the Berkeley bubble. A lot of questions came up, so that I was part of the design and management of a brand new graduate program, snuck it in, It was called Whole Systems Design. And the thing that was really dramatically different about that was, first, it was systems. It wasn't systems in biology or systems in economics. It was systems of its own. And the degree process was the design process.
Mhm.
The thing that most academic students and that don't really understand or are reflective of the process that they're going through learning. Sometimes it's just aggregate the simple stuff to the harder stuff to the hardest stuff or something like that. Whereas in design, you go through stages and phases and you experience different kinds of learning and you create different kinds of knowledge at each one of those. So it's a dramatically different pedagogy, dramatically different. And that's part of then what we've taken forward and has been brought into the center and the new school, is that it's based on systemics and it's based on design. And anyway.
Wonderful. So let's start with the school. So what is the name of the center? What is the name of the school? And why is that the name? Why did you pick that? Go ahead.
Well, the first thing is that early on, there was a colleague that said, you know, there's so many things going on, systems thinking, systems science, cybernetics, all these things. It gets confusing. So let's call it systemics. And systemics holds all of these. So I started using the term systemics so that I didn't have to explain all these different aspects of systems. And design, advanced design, I called it, where we're now engaged in very complex environments, dynamic environments, hugely complicated situations where we're trying to design something, create something in those environments. And the best thing to partner with when you're a designer is systemics. So systemics is the logic of design at this level. And so it's not a lot of places systems and design are separated out. So it's like you design a system or you think systemically about a design. But in this case, it's really integrated. You can't separate the two. It doesn't make sense. What designers do is create systems, and they have to understand how that works. So that's the reason that systemic design was brought together. The idea of the center is that you don't do anything in isolation. There's always an environment. There's always a context. You always have to attend to that. So if you're going to be successful with a school, you better have a friendly environment. You better have champions. You better have people who want to help and protect and sort of nurture what you're doing. You got to have that. A lot of programs fail because they don't have that kind of sustainment. And also the people that are involved, the staff, the ones that are working with the cohort of emergent systemic designers, the people just coming into the field, they have to have a way to reinforce and nurture their own advancements and learning, and to do it in the way, I hope, that the Berkeley bubble did, that there was these bonds, these connections amongst people, and we sort of have that with the people that we're working with now, but they all sort of understand that it's important to work as colleagues, as scholar practitioners. You don't divide out thinking from doing, which happens a lot in the world. You're a scholar practitioner. You're also a polymath. Almost all good designers, whether they know it or not, are polymath. And best creative people are polymath. And it's kind of popular nowadays to discuss which is better, being a generalist or a specialist. And I read a lot about that, and universities are talking about that. Well, actually, polymaths are neither, but they're both. So if you imagine creating a space mathematically, graphically, with specialists going down one side
Mhm.
and generalists going across the top. Well, the polymaths work in the center, the space that's created between those. Polymaths make connections, they make links, they make bonds, they create meaning as well as finding meaning. So people that are working with the center have to be polymaths who want the cohort, the people going through it to become polymaths, to act and behave as polymaths, not specialists and not generalists who want to keep that part. And that was actually a big concern in Berkeley with my committee and the academic senate, was that I wasn't going to become just another dilettante, that,
Mhm.
I was in the systems and, so we didn't have that sort of understanding of this is the work of a polymath and it's about designing, it's about making connections and links, but it happened, it went forward, and then everybody was fine. They figured, I wasn't going to become pretty much just a dilettante floating around in the world. It didn't mean I was going to have a place, but it didn't mean that it was going to be kind of because I was useless, that I didn't know anything at all. So there's in the school, like the center is this crucible to hold the energies of all the interactions between the school and the institute and the academy, so that like the academy is sort of the big the environment, the champions, the people that are going to sort of protect you, and the institute is your faculty, or what's called faculty. I guess we'll learn another term for it in a minute. So anyway, that's the systemic design piece. And the thing that fascinated me, because often when I was working with students over the years in systems design, and talking to people in business or government or any number of other areas, what they wanted to do, there are a lot of them wanted to do, well, I want to do stuff. I don't want to sit around and think about it. I want to do stuff. I'm here to do stuff. I'm an action person. And a lot of others were like, well, I want to kind of think things through. I'm a philosopher. So how do you not let that split take place? How do you not help it nurture it? So guess what? There's a model out there, and it's a flight school. I don't know if any of you are pilots or have taken any flight training, but it's this great model, and they're dealing with something that's very complex and demanding. Flying an airplane, if any of you have ever done that, you'll understand that it's not a casual sort of thing, and they don't give you the keys to the jet because you take a weekend workshop in systems designing or something like that. It's a real commitment if you want to become a skilled pilot. So taking that as just kind of a general model, and it's really worked so far. It really helps to think through. So you have preparation, and then you have what's called ground school. And ground school is, learning about stuff. So you have to learn that that's a helicopter and that's an airplane and that's a truck, just sort of basic stuff like that. And then you have to learn things. Well, here's the instruments and here's these things, and all the technical stuff. Well, it's kind of like that with the school. Then there's all of this stuff you really need to know, understand intellectually about being a systemic designer. And then there's a phase in flight school where you go in and you start to learn how to work with instruments, and you do simulations, and you're actually testing things out, and you're trying out flying without actually going up and sort of threatening your own health or anybody else's by not being able to fly correctly. You go through these simulations and things. So that's the next piece. And there's the piece then that comes after that, where you're flying with somebody who knows how to fly. and they'll let you fly, and they'll ask you, Harold, why the hell did you do that? That's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be doing like this, okay? So they coach you because they know what they're doing, and they're coaching, and you're getting to do and try out what you want to try out. And then the final one is when what they call solo or catch air. And that's when you get to try on your own then to take control and do your own sort of flying. So the school, I was a little nervous, and other people are nervous. The people are going to take it literally that this is a design flight school. But really, it's just the spirit of it. You have to learn what you're doing. You have to test it out. You have to try it out with mentors and with people who can coach you and work. And you have to sort of exercise your wings a little bit. And then you get to do it on your own. And people can evaluate that and, check you further. And also, it has this marvelous sense that it's lifelong. Like the next thing in the flight school is you go to from one engine to two engines, or you go to from combustion to jet, or you go from this to this, or you start to carry passengers instead of just, mail or something like that. So there's always stages of challenges that you have to go through. So this isn't just a one-shot thing that you just go through and you're done, and somebody gives you a piece of paper and they say, welcome, systemic designer, go forth and systemic design. This is really a lifelong sort of thing building. And there's this model of sort of capacitation, I guess. I think I like it better than training or learning, that you go through phases and stages of going from, so there's like great models in from the Oriental traditions and that of marital arts or martial arts, not marital arts, martial arts, where you go through stages of the beginning until you get up to levels of mastery. And it's like the same thing in this case. You go through from just knowing stuff, being able to follow directions, follow rules, to being able to challenge rules, to being able to change rules, to being able to create rules, to be able to work without rules, which is sort of the martial arts model a bit. So it's not that you're done, one and done, and you go through one of these cycles and that's it. It really is a long-term thing, and you're slowly trying to work your way up through these levels to become a scholar practitioner and a what we call a guarantor of design, that you know enough that you can make sure things turn out the way everybody wants it. So that's why it's called the Design Flight School. Maybe we'll change that. But the thing is, like around here, where I am in Montana in the US, the local Native Americans called the horse, the first time it showed up, they called it a sundog because they had no way to reference it to anything. And we've done the same thing with our technologies in that we have the horseless carriage. So we referenced horses because what was this thing? We had no idea of automobile. This was a horseless carriage. We had an iron horse. So we didn't know what a locomotives were. It was an iron horse. And now we have artificial intelligence. It's not intelligence or anything else. It's something else, but we call it artificial intelligence because that's what we have experience with, we think, is things that are intelligent. So the school, actually calling it a flight school, is sort of, it's different enough, unique enough, and it's probably nothing people have a real direct reference to through all their educational experiences and that. So what do we call it once everybody sort of understands what it is? But right now, it's great, I think, to call it a design flight school because it gives you all sorts of references and checks, and it's not a simple little algorithm of how to learn,
Yeah, no,
learn.
I love it. And I think it's good that you have an owl there. So I don't think people are going to try to say, okay, I have to be an owl. So I don't think you're going to have people, but what I really love about this is several things. One is that most universities say, okay, you learn first and then you apply. And then you apply is kind of outside of it. So there is this division. Moment you say it's a flight school, you are trying to fly. So it's all about having the skill to do something. It is about, and I like flight, the different kind of connotations of that you are actually flying. You're trying to do something which is spectacular, and you're flying in the air, and you're going places, and at the same time that it requires skill, and your life depends on it, and other people's life depends on it. So it is very serious venture of saying that, look, I'm learning to fly. Okay. Second, flight school. The thing is that what has happened is that there are some places where this idea of learning, of bringing concepts into percepts, of always taking the highest ideal and making it particular, is what is focused on. This was true in the apprentice system, for example. This is true in the way in which, for example, doctors are trained, that there is this continuous back and forth going on between practice, and you're never away from another person who is at a higher level to guide you. So I like that entire context of saying that this is the it's life and death thing. It's a very exciting thing. It will take you places. You need to take it seriously. There is a lot of knowledge involved in that. You need to systematically make it, build it into your muscles, build it into your habits, build it into your thoughts, so that then it will express. I also love the term scholar practitioner. It's like, normally it's like, oh, no, I'm practical, oh yeah, I studied back, different things when I was in university, but now I'm practicing. But scholar practitioner, and again, when people are studying at the university, the importance of actually how does this transform the world and how does it impact the world is not front and center. So they can just fly in all kinds of directions and run into many things there, because they are not responsible. They don't take responsibility of saying, look, I'm actually trying to do something. And they're just kind of imagining things without the anchor of reality. So, and all of this, so this is profoundly kind of Aristotelian way of thinking, of saying all my ideas I'll, get from reality and put it back to reality. This loop going back and forth between, the highest of concepts and the most exquisite of percepts all the time. And all of that is really, I think is captured very well in what you describe. So I think it's a great name.
So I want to say something about the owl.
Yes.
Before we get too far down the road. That's Sophia. It's Sophia's owl, wisdom. And in the time of Sophia, thinking and acting wasn't separated like it is now. Was held together, the classic Greeks called Sophia the wise hand. And they were always amazed, expressed amazement at how they could make something like a ship appear in the harbor that never existed before, or how they could make something like a temple appear on a mountain that had never existed before. How did they do that? And that was this notion then of Sophia being the wise hand. Before the Socratics split Sophia into two, and it became first concepts, and then it became those who did stuff into the bottom of the hierarchy. And if you made stuff, No, it's the philosophers that need to run the country and the city and everything. So that's what that harkens back to, is that notion of Sophia, the wise hand, of reintegrating that.
Talking of that, I mean, it reminds me of, we went through Jacob Branowski's Ascent of Man. And in one of the places where he's talking about knowledge, he takes example of a sculptor. And he says, look, most people will wonder why I'm talking about knowledge and I'm giving you example of sculptor. But see, to be a sculptor, it's basically this brain and this, it's your eyes processed by brain doing this and that loop. And you're trying to see the grain in the stone that you're working with. And you have to understand that really well in order to do what you're doing. So, and he says it's all about this loop between eye, brain, hand loop, he calls it. That is what knowledge is about. That is what skill is about. That is what design is about. So wonderful.
Yeah. And one of the other things, I mean, this is fairly involved, the whole model of the pedagogy and that. But one of the things is that it focuses on what I would call deep learning. And in the little schema that I put together anyway, when we see something and we think we kind of understand it, there's a single loop that goes back to, do you want to do this different? We do something. So that's the whole prototyping thing that's so popular nowadays with the Stanford model. And that is, you do something, you think about it, you do it different, you think about it, you do it different. Then there's another level, second order loop, where you feed back and say, should you think about this differently? Not do it over again or prototype it, but does this need to be thought through again? And then there is another loop that goes back and say, so do you have to change your worldview? Do you have to change who you are a little bit? Do you have to understand better about? And then, of course, there's another loop that's even deeper than that. So the challenge for the emergent systemic designer is to be able to learn through all those multiple layers of feedback. So you can prototype if you're pretty sure that that's what you want to do, but that's not always the case. The case is that, should you be doing something other? Acuff said, the righter you do the wrong thing, the wronger you get. So that's the loop that's missing. You have to think about, maybe we should be doing something different. And maybe you should have a different perspective or a different value system that you bring to this. Maybe it's, it's the wrong person you're bringing. So anyway, it's deep learning is one of those things. There are hierarchies and orders of learning that's different from the traditional schools. So that, well, it's, you guys are lucky I don't have time to show you slides, or you'd be, it'd be over anyway. There are these different ways of looking at approaching the process, the arrow of time that you go through when you're learning and what you want to accomplish, what the outcomes are, which also means that this isn't a one and done. I mean, it's that sort of, using the flight idea again, it's what elevation, altitude are you flying at? And if you're flying here, this is what you need to be paying attention to and doing. And if you're here, then that's what you need to be paying attention to and doing. And before, I wanted to say that we get totally lost in my rabbit hole here with this idea, is that what struck me reflecting back on the Berkeley bubble notion was that these scholars, practitioners were being attracted by some kind of strange attractor. they were being pulled forward. And it was that there was this real deep paradigm that was pushing to be expressed, and that what they were doing, and ultimately down to the center and the school, and that what all of this is just a reification of this deep paradigm that we can't name yet, or we don't know what it is, but it influences. It's what one of the Berkeley philosophers called background practice. It's the thing that gives us value and meaning to what we're doing, and we respond to it even though we don't know exactly what it is. It's feeding us, and we're paying attention to it. So I think the paradigm is still expressing itself in different ways, and this school is one way of doing that. There's exemplars that you can say, this is what it would look like if the paradigm was in operation, if we see it. This is the kind of stuff that happens. So that's the link, I think, is slowly beginning to express and reify the paradigm itself without having to label it and give it full exposure. It's not like people use paradigm very casually nowadays. You change your socks. Oh my God, there's a paradigm shift. You know, I'm a new person. I've changed my socks. That's not the kind of paradigm that we're talking about. These are deep paradigms. These are sort of, what are we immersed in? It's the water to the fish. I don't know if you guys have heard the story from the David Foster Wallace.
Go ahead.
He gave a presentation at a graduation, and he told this story. He said, this is water. So there's two young fish swimming along, and they're going, and then this older fish comes swimming by, and he looks over at him and says, "Hi boys, how's the water?" So the two young fish go swimming along, and pretty soon they stop and say, "What the hell is water?" So it's sort of like that. We're in the water all the time. We're immersed. We're saturated in something that we can't see. So how do we, and that's part of what the school can help you do, is you can begin to become aware of the water you're in and figure out, do I need to change where I am? How do I jump into the next fishbowl? That might be where I want to be. Or anyway, it's becoming more aware.
Wonderful. Harold, what I would like to do is that I really like the graphics that you sent. So I will bring up the graphics and we can go through them. If you want me to skip through anything, we can go through that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, or can you see I've shared my desktop. Can you see my desktop?
No, you'll need to hit the share screen.
Oh, okay.
There is a green button right in the middle at the bottom. If you click on share screen, do you see it?
Yep.
Just click on that.
Okay.
And a whole bunch of windows should show up, and it'll give you the option of, yeah, there it is. I can see it. It's coming up.
Okay.
Give me just a second. Yes, exactly. Go ahead.
Okay, how do I get this one off my?
You can just move it. Yeah, you can just move it up. Let me see. It is actually showing the whole screen. Let's do one thing. What you can do, can you stop sharing? Click on stop share. Okay, now go ahead and click on share screen, and there it will bring up a bunch of windows. Just click on the window. Don't share the desktop, but just share the windows which is showing the slides. It will say school slides.
Does that help?
Give me a second. It's coming up. Yes, perfect. Perfect. And now, if you want to do one better, you see the play button at the top, kind of little bit on the left, if you could click on the play button. You see the play button? Yeah, a little to the, yeah, there. Right there. There is a play
This
button.
is stop video.
Oh, no. Right there, there is a play button. Yeah, that one.
That one?
Yeah, that one. Yes, it's perfect now. We can see the slide.
Okay, but I don't get to see you guys, so don't be saying anything behind my back.
I will
So-
ensure that. I have muted everybody, so nobody can say anything behind. Go ahead.
So anyway, I've already told about, the interesting thing is, I found out, is nobody understands water. The scientists don't understand water. I've did some research on it, and there's some strange stuff. So part of what I didn't get to introduce to you is that the thing about systems and systemics is that we're all part of whatever's going on systemically, so that all of us here are all at some state of listening. So that this is the common sort of ones when you're listening to yourself, or you want something affirming, so you're reconfirming yourself, or critical. You hear things that disconfirm yourself, what you already know. So a lot of times you ask somebody, well, how did the presentation go? Well, I didn't get anything out of it. Well, maybe it wasn't very good, but maybe they were at state one where they weren't listening to anything about themselves, or they were just listening for things that would confirm what they already knew, and weren't listening for things that they didn't know. And I find when I go to a presentation or anything, I'll check where I am, and usually I'm at the affirming one. I'm listening for what I already know, and then I have to sort of remind myself that no, you really have to listen for new information. So anyway, this is just that it's not like all of this information about the school and the center and everything is all external. It's an internal process as well as what you hear about it, how you hear about it. And that makes a big difference. So this is another piece quickly. If you're not pushed or pulled into somebody else's future, there are 4 sort of ways that we deal with future. One is drifting into the future, one is colliding with it, and one is retreating, which just means you back away from everything you don't like, whatever the situation is, and that's problem solving. And that's the way 99.9% of the people justify taking action, is by defining a problem, because it takes away accountability, responsibility, everything else. Businesses do it, politicians do it, governments do it, militaries. Everybody talks constantly about problems, about the big problems or the hard problems, or we got to do something about the problem. Everybody's retreating, backing away from the present into the future. So what the school, the center does is tries to make the case for advancing into the future. And that takes a different set of skills and everything. So anyway, yeah, we talked about that. So the aspirations, like Wes said, secure improvement in the human condition, getting expanded a little bit to the aspiration is, or the promise of systemic design is to serve the right people at the right time, in the right place, for the right reasons, in the right way. And so that just expands a bit more and sort of centers it on what designers do, what systemic designers want to do. And the agency that comes with something like this, since nobody's given you a contract or asked you to do it, you have to sort of deal with the agency. Gives you the right to do a new school or center. So in this case, the agency comes, we're acting as surrogate clients for future generations of systemic designers, because they're not here to represent their own interests. So we're going to act as surrogate clients. And that means if we figure out what would be best to do, that helps the real client, which is the future generations. And we serve the intentions of past generations and thinkers, and the desiderata of present future generations. So that was one of the things that West really sort of talked to us a lot about, is that our ancestors, what they wanted and desired for us and for the world, needs to count. It's not something that can just be dismissed out of hand. They had real passion, love for the future, for future generations. So we need to take that into account. So why does this, you always have to give somebody a reason for why they need to consider engaging in some kind of change or different, going to school or anything. So anyway, the scientists tell us now that for sure this is the Anthropocene. They can't figure out for sure when it started. Was it 1950s or was it back earlier in geologic time? But anyway, everybody's sort of agreeing that this is the age where there are no natural systems any longer. Every system has been influenced by human activity. And what people then want, I mean, that's one way to just kind of put people down and say, just go away, you've done a lot of damage. The other is to say, really would like some accountability. Now, from now on, we'd like some responsibility, so that we need new norms, we need new ways of thinking. I mean, the idea that you can't, Einstein supposedly had said, you can't solve problems using the same method that created the problem in the first place. You have to think differently. Well, so this is the Anthropocene. We've made a mess out of a lot of things. So how do we think differently now? Not give up. How do we think differently? And so for the incipient systemic designers, there's a lot of things that are asked. And a part of that is unlearning the habits of inquiry and action that they have, and to begin to establish kind of new norms of thinking. And there are a lot of other things, probably not important right now, but one of the, I guess, the key pieces out of this that you ask people to do, that's like their stance. What do they believe now? What's sort of the bottom turtle? So the reality is that description and explanation do not prescribe action. So science, good science, describes and explains, but you can't find out what action ought to be taken from a description and explanation, no matter how good the science is. Riddle introduced us to this idea, this German term, Sachzwang, that it's coercion by fact. So you just start collecting facts, and pretty soon you make a case because you've got this overwhelming factual bag that it's not possible to come up with action out of it, but people assume, okay, got all the numbers, got all the science, statistics, everything. Okay, yeah, we should do this. Well, that's a leap that you can't make from facts. The thing that the systemic designers do is that they their intentions are to guide and to navigate. That's what you ought to be able to do. Pathfinders, wayfinders. That's one of the things that we need to be good at as systemic designers. And our intentions are to design whole systems, which means that they're viable and all the rest of that. Tension, spelled with an S, means that's direction, aim, and spelled with a T means outcomes, purpose. So that talked a bit about the stance, the idea of the stance that we buy into postulates, beliefs, assumptions, assertions, just like science or art or the humanities or any of the religions or anything does. There's a kind of a bottom turtle that we stand on, from which then we build our actions and our inquiring systems and that. So we just have to be aware of what that is. And in this one, of course, we do have postulates and beliefs and assumptions. And I had talked about description, explanation, not prescribing action, and prediction and control don't justify action. So advanced systemic design is the conjunction of big words, big word alert, poiesis and phronesis. And poiesis, and it's unfortunate we don't have these terms in our culture more, but poiesis is the activity where we bring things into existence that never existed before, to make. And Shrikant was talking about the sculptor making something. You know, it's that process of making. And phronesis is wise action. Sophia, an active wisdom, intelligence, and practical or prudent action. So it's not something that's just efficient or optimal, but it's actually wise. And of course, there's a lot more to that as well. Talked about that. So this is sort of the context for the center. And the thing about centering in systems is that centers hold systems together. They're centripetal force, and they pull things or hold things together in a composition. So that's what the center itself is there for, to help pull it together. And sort of an example is that idea of the centers. These are traditional university models on the left for their curriculum. So the abandoned center, the universities aren't sure what they're up to anymore, because everybody has gone off into their areas of expertise, specialization, particulars, and there's nothing at the center to really hold. There's no center of gravity. The idea of the plastic center, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, that's where all these universals sort of come together, moosh together in some kind of a center. The hard center, you've all heard of core curriculum, and that's where everything has to emerge from this sort of hard core of universal truths and generalities from which the rest of the curriculums can develop. So the interesting thing about design curriculum, it's a liquid center. So that, and again, that's a whole piece to pay attention to, much more complicated than we have time for now. This just reiterates the notion that the flight school is the learning system, and then the institute's context, and the academies, the environment, and you need all of those things for a viable system to work. And this is the model, at least essence of the model from the flight school. It's ground school preparations, foundations, fundamentals, flight school simulations, exercises, learning to catch air, practice, coach, sorties, and courage, showing courage in action. And this is kind of a, I guess, similar sort of thing to the flight school. It just shows that the levels are professional preparation, personal preparation, and project preparation. Same idea, just a different way of approaching it. And this is part of the sort of influences that came into the center, and that is back in the 90s, the Carnegie Foundation did a study where they suggested scholarship needed to be reconsidered. There should be scholarship of discovery integration, application, and teaching versus the traditional universities notion of scholarship as research, teaching, and service. So that the Carnegie Foundation said, well, here's 4 they should think of. So I took those 4, and this is when I was working with the other design program. Said scholarship of discovery is really inquiry for action, and integration is systemics, and application is service and agency, and teaching is capacitation. And the reconstitution of Sophia, of course. So this is the master syllabus for the school. Already talked about this a bit, but until there's a better sort of way to label this. And I've really found, and other people have found this to be really helpful. So for instance, there's a colleague in Australia that's working on at the ground school level on personal development. And she's actually got some courses in that associated with the university. And some of us have worked with the professional development side of the ground school. I've given quite a few master courses in that area. I'm going to start presenting more of them because this is a sort of a way to warm up and build the resources for the school when it's more fully funded and it's up and running and we can begin to take cohorts. So anyway, I'm going to be developing more of the master courses and that at the ground school level. Other colleagues are doing the same thing, trying things out, and then being able to bring it back into the school when it's sort of a viable commodity. And then, of course, doing the simulations, flight training can do a bit of that. I want to do that. A lot of this, my master classes, that was before the virus shut everything down. And now it's like going back, trying to get online, which is good and bad because I wasn't able to travel or anything, but could pick up people in India, in Scandinavia, in Australia, from all over the world online. And you can do it both synchronous and asynchronous. And anyway, this is in process, and I'm going to be working for myself anyway, for sure, on developing more ground school offerings and finding a way to do the design flight training. Oops, got ahead of myself. So this talks a bit about pedagogy and andragogy, and I've started always to find how few academics actually understand what pedagogy is that's engaged at their universities or their colleges or their training programs. So this is an example of a hierarchy of things that you pay attention to: developing comprehension, capability, competence, confidence, that sort of, all the way up to character. And there's different levels of expertise that are developed. And the systemic designer doesn't have to be an expert in each one of those, but they certainly have to be an expert in design expertise. And of course, the value expertise belongs to the client. And this is order of learning. So this is first order, what's true, what's real. Second order is all about systemics. Third order is about schema. And fourth order is conjunctions, compositions. And then the third is about guarantors of destination and of direction. So this, when I talked about this notion of what altitude are you flying at, it depends on what you're up to when you're learning. Are you at the first and second orders, which are important, essential, and moving then into the second and the third order? And this is what I tried, I guess, was making air graphics, drawing in the air, was the inquiry in systemic designing is the inquirers are polymaths, not specialists and generalists, although those are all important. Being a generalist and specialist is important, and becoming a systemic designer doesn't mean you have to give that up if you're a generalist now or a specialist, but you do something different as a polymath. So it's actually how designers, good designers, think, and what they do is work in the in-between things, connecting and relating and linking and bonding. There's a difference between training and learning. So immense amount of money is spent in the government and business and other areas on training. And the thing about training is that there's a logical relationship between the input that you give to the student and what you see, you expect to see when the student does some projects or some work. There's an expected outcome because you've given the kind of input that you want to see. The thing about learning, design learning in this case, is that what you find is you get expected, unexpected outcomes. That's what you want from a designer, is that you expect them to be competent and you expect them to be doing something that's different that you hadn't imagined before, because the outcomes are indeterminate in design, that they're not given. The answer isn't at the back of the book. It's indeterminate. It has to be decided on. It has to be configured. So that's a major difference in between traditional educational systems and programs, and to get people, not even within universities, but certainly get people in governmental agencies, military, business, all the rest, to not just focus on training, but to begin to focus on learning as well. Now, this is what I had talked about before, about deep learning and the single loop, double loop, triple loop. And this is an important piece, I think, to get people to become, everybody to become more reflective on what they're doing, so that I mean, nowadays, everything, I would just read over and over again how great prototyping is. I think IDEO or somebody started all this. And yeah, it's really great. It's single loop learning. And we really need to be able to do double loop, triple loop as well. Don't tell them I said anything bad about them. And I think finally, this is about the lifelong learning piece, and this is the capacitation level that I was talking about, where we go from novices through all these different levels up to scholar and expert, scholar practitioner and master, guarantor and underwriter. And this is the different levels of expertise as an example. And there's many other ways of expressing this, and you can, and I have sort of overlaid when people have asked me, well, where's the bachelor's degree? Where's the master's degree? Where's the PhD or something like that, which you can do. But anyway, this is just a kind of a reminder, and it focuses on what you're trying to do. And it's not one shot. You don't leave as an adaptive expert with a piece of paper expecting to be a design expert. There's more to it. There's more work to be done over time. And as part of the learning and the deep learning and that takes. And that's it.
Wonderful.
Sorry about that.
Harold, no, this was just amazing. I mean, thank you. This was so unexpected and so it's just so rich, so rich. I'm just completely floored. What I want to do is I want to give a chance for my friends to ask you questions. And then I have a couple of questions for you, but I'll keep them for the end. I'm going to go with my friends here. Folks, if you have any questions, I'm sure you do, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Let's focus on questions first. And then I will give you a chance to talk about what you got from this entire encounter. But go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. We're going to start with Rupali. Rupali, go ahead.
Hello, this was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. There were so many things I wanted to ask, but I'll start with this. You talked about the process of design being rooted in what is. So how do you teach that idea of discovery and knowing what is? The second question I have is about character. You talked about the preparation of the self in addition to the preparation of the mind to learn to think in a design manner. So when you talk about character, how do you develop character? What are your ideas? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Harold, I just want to introduce you to Rupali. She is a very good friend for 25 years. She is an architect who now does architecting of children by being a teacher. She runs a school, Montessori school. So kind of character development is something that she does, deals with in the child context. But go ahead, sir.
So I'm not sure I understood fully about the is piece, but the design inquiry, at least in the schema that I use, has these 4 different parts to it. One part of the inquiry could be counted as research. What's true? What's universal? What can we count? What's facts? The other one is that assessment. What's real? What's now? What can we count on as being this time, this instance? What is that? That's something that's real. It's something that we agree on. It's not something that we research or anything. We agree on what's real. We have methods of doing that. The next one is search, because research and assessment doesn't tell us what we want to do or ought to do or can do. So we do research and we begin a process of looking for what would be ideal. What would be something that we would want to bring into reality. So we go through a search process, obviously very complex and demanding, because search has an indeterminate end. How do you get to an outcome if it's indeterminate? And we're so used to, because the science backgrounds, we're so used to having determinate outcomes. The answers are in the back of the book. We believe if we do enough research, we'll find really the thing is. So, and then of course, the fourth one is then taking action and sort of reflective learning from taking action, learn in action what we're doing. So those are the 4 ways that I describe or define inquiry for myself. So the is part is the assessment. It's very important to know where you are. It's sort of in the navigation forward to the future, you have to sort of understand where you're located and what's the bearing and, all the other things that you need as a navigator. And I forgot the second question.
It's about,
I'm sorry.
About character development.
Character. The character piece, of course, is up to the student. You can't make somebody become a different character. They have to find and engage with that themselves. But there's a lot of traditional, going back, pre-Socratics, everything, a lot of talk about character, arete, good character, good quality. So we have a lot of sort of models of what that is. And it's one of the things, like if we're designing the designer and you're putting together something like my colleague in Australia is doing, putting something together that helps people sort of refine their character, pay attention to it, develop it. But it's up to them. They've got to do that. they have to engage, contract with you or somebody with themselves to develop and become aware and reflective. And the thing about design that's different from science and art is scientists and artists can be really jerks. And it doesn't matter. They can still do good science and they can do good art. A designer, because you're representing and working for somebody else's interests on their behalf, you can't be a jerk. You got to be somebody that can work with somebody in an honest way, empathy, all the rest of it. So, and there are a lot of ways, and I've found going through and working with the colleague in Australia, a lot of ways to represent what character is and what kind of models people have developed, what kind of schemas that they have developed. It's just the thing in traditional education, nobody cares. Nobody pays attention to what kind of character you have. Even if you're, well, maybe in psychology or something, they'll have a couple of courses on doing psychology on yourself. But certainly as an architect, I never had that when I was being trained, and I wasn't, I'm sure, I don't know, maybe it's changed nowadays. Maybe people are getting some kind of awareness, but oh, we sure didn't have it. If you're a biologist or whatever, yeah. No, it's all about that out there. It's not about you. Everything's external. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Next up, folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to ask questions. Next up is Zheng. She's the one who, presented all these amazing slides on the Design Way. Go ahead.
Hi,
oh,
Harold.
hello.
Yeah,
How you
so
doing?
yeah, it's quite exciting to hear about your school. So I have a question. I think, recently I just listened to this Second Brain, and I was thinking, they mentioned about how we were lack of information. Now we were kind of overwhelmed with information. And I think the continual learning is kind of critical for everybody in the lifetime. You don't rely on get any job for 20 years, 25 years anymore. Like you have to constant learning, everything is changing. So I think this kind of training is very essential for everybody to adapt to the new, new condition and improve yourself. And I found, we seems only have like college educational, master, then auto school, you're on your own. Like I'm with AIA Seattle, I'm trying to organize this design lab, as a small business, I want to talk to people about ideas of design. And very few people are interested. They're only talking about the building code, building technology. Just like you said in your book, there's a technical architect, but there's a bigger things behind it. And nobody seems to care or have time to care. And it seems only in college they're talking about ideas. Once out of college, nobody care about idea anymore. I'm just shocked. I think, I think we really need a place. I was even thinking maybe we can team up with UW students or something, like somebody more interested in the design theory behind just practice. But, I think it seems the school is more about idea than practice, only about practice, but you need this intertwine, like back and forth to really improve. So I'm curious, how your school, who are your students, who your, as I can see it's applied to everybody. I just wondering, how the school works in general,
Yeah, that is a big challenge right now because the times, there is a lot of anti-intellectualism. There's a lot of focus on bright, shiny things, products. AI is blowing everybody out of the water. I'm working with somebody from Carnegie Mellon about social media and things, about what it does to people's lives, how they've lost control over products, how these new products are just overwhelming them. Young women are committing suicide because of things that are going online, and because others self-harming, all these terrible things. And the people who produce these products are all apologizing. We're really sorry, really sorry, really sorry. Where do you make a change? How do you engage with people to become better at designing things like this? How do you get their attention? So it's, people are used to now. The notion of what is the Twitter is 240 characters. Everybody's used to really instantaneous things, not a lot of time to think or read. No, I really need my stuff now. I mean, it's like uphill battle, but my understanding is the younger generation says, no, wait, we really want something different now. Our lives are crap. I mean, we don't have hope left. We don't have, quality of life things. We don't have all this. We really need something different. So maybe they're a part of the next group of students. But there are also, I find, a lot of people who are professionals and are working in areas, even if they're established in certain disciplines or professions, say, it really isn't working. I need to have a different way of working. So you might be able to tap in to their interests. And it was when I was directing the whole systems design program, we actually, we had all those things not being a known entity and that sort of thing. We actually started successfully competing against MBA programs, and places like Boeing and Microsoft and that started paying their employees to attend the program, even though everybody hated the title. What the hell? It's like, Sundog. What the hell is this thing? Whole systems thing. We don't know. It's weird. It sounds like, alternate stuff. No, but they still showed up, and corporations were starting to pay to send their students there. And it was actually one of the programs was rated one of the top programs by one of the business journals. And it had a very good reputation. And of course, the new president came in and says, oh God, that's some good coursework. What I want is that course to go to management. I want this course to go to psychology. I want this. And disassembled it. And it just went away. And she took all these best parts, and it's like taking all the best parts out of a car and putting them into cars. Of course, it doesn't make a car. Haykoff does a great job of explaining how you can't take the best parts of different cars and put them together and get a car. You can't do it. So anyway, that was the demise of that program, but it did well. It was hard to market and get acceptance. People were conservative in a lot of ways, and like what you call it, how do you name it? Is it the horseless carriage? What is it? Because you don't know. But anyway, this new school will have some of the same challenges, but I'm hoping. My heart just went out when I read that MIT got $100 million to sprinkle design amongst their programs. I thought, oh my God. I used to think the Stanford $1 million grant was great. I didn't know you could go that high, $100 million. But of course, those are all like product and service design. They're not systemic design, and they're not courses that are based on a design learning pedagogy or any of the other things. Still, one can always hope. That's the next stage. Of course, I've been advised by some advisors who are pretty well known in doing things. They say, why don't you just go ahead and develop and start asking people for money? I hate that. I hate that. I'm not good at that stuff, but it's what we got to do now, is to go around. And you can't go, for instance, and ask for a grant or something, because grant people say, well, what's the outcome? Well, part of the design process, it's indeterminate. They have no clue what that means. No, you got to tell me what you're going to do, what it's going to be. Exactly. We need funding to design, pull people together, get the team working. Well, tell us what's, so there's a lot of that cultural sort of thing, but that's where we are right now, is at that point where I have to go out and begin to talk to big dealers and people. And there is no space that I can see, or you'd really be nervous at universities now, because they're just not structured to take in a design program. I mean, they can do professional programs that design, but not ones that are based on systemics and the pedagogy of design. They just don't have that. If they think you can produce money or something like that without them knowing what it is you're doing, that might be it. I wouldn't want to be in that kind of position. So like the Berkeley bubble, you know, it's just begin to, in a way, it's very similar to what you all have done with the 52 ideas, and begin to form just without having somebody say, go into a committee, do this, put all this stuff together, do that, here's a contract. So we can do that a bit, but it is, that's one of the big challenges, is how do you become viable economically? It's part of why the master's classes are something that we're trying out, is we can begin to generate some funding and some interest, sort of chumming the water. It's what was called the sizzle and not the steak. You begin to work on developing the essence of what's going to happen, and not necessarily have to have the banquet ready yet. So, but it's needed. I mean, I really think it's needed. I can't stand to read the news anymore. I just can't stand it. It's like, holy crap, we got to be thinking differently in a lot of areas. We've got to. We can't. It's not. And I think that's where the younger generations are at right now. It's like, got to do something different, folks, because we're inheriting what people call a shit show. You know, this is just not working for us. You got to be doing something different as adults. So it's part of that.
Thank you. Harold. I mean, it is a very tough problem, and like we are doing you know, what we can. I mean, the great thing is that, you know, if you look at 200 years ago, or even like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you would not be actually able to communicate with people. So now the thing is that at least the communication is possible. I mean, it does take, you know, for things to take off, but we have the ability of reaching more people. And I do not understand how you know, the dynamics of these works and what takes off and what doesn't take off. But it's all about networks, and you know, and I mean, I believe in doing good things and keep doing good things and try to connect as much as possible. So, but that's not a strategy. I know that. But I, you know, I hear what you're saying. Thank you. Next up is Maritza, Austin, Becky, and but go ahead. Harold, you wanted to say something?
That is a strategy, by the way. Networking.
Yes.
Very simple strategy. Very.
Yeah, that's what we have. Like, I mean, that's what we're trying to do with this Bucky series of, you know, just saying, look, I mean, Bucky is a comprehensivist. He is all about, you know, improvement of the world. And there are all these people kind of all over the place who are working on things separately, just connecting them up, connecting them to everybody who would have any kind of appreciation of these ideas, and then seeing what can be done. It's difficult. It's not a strategy in the sense that I cannot predict what will happen, when, to whom, and what, all of those. But I think I know that it's a good thing. That's what I know. Next up is Maritza, Austin, Becky, and Richard. Maritza, go ahead.
Hi, Maritza.
Hi, Harold. It's lovely to have you on this platform again. You know, your bottom turtles in your design stance, they seem like these basic tenets that I feel like we need to everybody run to a different corner and scream it at the top of our lungs and hope that it sticks. And looking at that, I can't help but feel that it's, I guess it aligns a little bit actually with what Shrikant is just saying, is that, you know, the whole school action coming to fruition, that may be down the line, but this needs a voice and action. It needs its own like baby legs. Like maybe you need you need like the front line soldiers to put the word out for you. And maybe that's just another form of networking. My question was going to be about how do we, so we have these bottom turtles, and I love the idea of, choose to be intentional. It's one of the first ones that I think you put on the slide. And if it wasn't, I apologize. It's the first one my eye went to. Slight bias. But the question that came up is, in a world where it is so acceptable to drift that people think they're doing something even when they're drifting, how do we unlearn that? Or as it were, like if you have, do we instead, like what would be the plan of action for not rejecting students, telling them you're just not worthy, you're just drifter? How do we unlearn it? Or what is there, do you have in mind a component within the initial phases of the school to kind of help to retrain the brain that's been addled for however many years it's been out in today's current society?
Yeah, that's kind of the holy grail, and the ideal for me. I use this notion of the overview effect. I don't know if all of you are aware of it. All the astronauts, cosmonauts have said when they get back that when they first turned and looked at the Earth floating in space, it totally changed them immediately. No degrees, no courses, nothing. They came back different people. Their professions look different, their personal lives look different, because they'd seen this place, this vulnerable little place. So how can we can't all go to space, we can't all have that kind of experience. How do you get people, what kind of experience can you give them to get them to that kind of overview effect? In the one graduate program I was telling you about, we interview the students when they were graduating, and the one thing that they would say was, I never imagined I could be here, and I would believe. And they were very nervous going through the process. It's like every time they wanted to bail on, it's not going to work because it was creative process in some place. They weren't in control. I can't make it. It's not going to work. No, I can't. And, a week, 2 days later, whatever, they'd come in and say, you never believe I just had this breakthrough. So the creative process, getting people to go through a creative process, authentic, gives them that sense of aha. So if you can do that with their education, because unlearning is a difficult thing to do, especially when the rewards have been for the way you do it now. I just think about faculty and them changing the idea of scholarship. All their promotions, their rate, their reputations, everything all depends on those 3 traditional measures of scholarship that are in place. So you're not going to tell them, you've got to change your idea of what scholarship is, because they've been rewarded. Who they are has been, because they've followed this 3 points. So how do you do that? It's called sunk costs. They have so much invested in the way things are and the way they are. How do you get them to understand it's worth investing in something different? And it's tough. It's really tough. How do you give people an aha perspective? And people have those experiences all the time. I mean, it can be, well, I guess the most dramatic one would be a near-death experience or something. Suddenly somebody says, hey, you know, my life needs to be different. I need to think differently about how I'm doing things. So you can't do that with people all the time, especially prospective students. But how do we get people to a point where it just takes a different way of thinking? It doesn't take another degree. It doesn't take more courses. It just takes a different way of looking. How do you get people to do that? How do they get comfortable? And that's not something that I have a lock on yet, but it's something I think about a lot and I watch for, and for people, how they do that successfully. We used to have this marvelous term that's not used so much anymore called sublime. And I think in the book, Eric and I talk about how you change core judgment in people by the experiences that they have. Well, the sublime is one way of doing that. And it's not a popular thing nowadays. People don't have or talk about having sublime experiences. But it used to be that music and art and nature, a lot of things would give us this experience that was so deep and profound that it changed us at the core. It changed who we are. So, it's getting back to a time when we appreciate the sublime again, and that we can experience the sublime. I mean, I don't want to start to sound like an old guy, but there's a lot of superficial stuff going on nowadays, I think. Not a lot of deep, really profound things going on, but yeah, I can know in my own life, there was times when I said, whoa, holy crap. And I was never the same afterward. The nice thing about being a designer is when you go through one of the design processes and you have an insight, it changes who you are because you have a new knowledge. You've seen something totally different and you're a new person, which is why the design process is such a good method process to as an armature to define how your school unfolds. So hopefully there'll be some of those sublime experiences, some credible aha moments. And it's not even about, wow, that's a great design, but it's like, I have a whole different understanding of the world now because of that breakthrough. I'm a different person. And that's the thing that you're looking for, not just the product or the service or whatever has happened. Yeah, it changes. I mean, that's the great thing about being a designer. If you're a dentist, you do dents all day, every day after day, and you're not really a different person, except more exhausted at the end of the week. As a designer, you do some work, you have those breakthrough insights, profound insights. You're different. You can't go back. You can't unsee what you just did. So, yeah, but it's a challenge.
Wonderful. I just want to say, I mean, this is a core issue. Like Napoleon Hill had a book called Outwitting the Devil. And there he identifies there are essentially two choices you have. You can either drift or you can have a definite purpose. And most people just drift, like we saw when we studied like Gita or all of these things. It's all about kind of attachment to things, just being satisfied by reacting to things that you're already familiar with, what is around you, your habits, your emotions, you're just reacting to it. And so you're drifting, you're not really doing anything. You're just, reacting to things. But the opposite of that is to have a definite purpose, a definite intention of saying that is good, that is ideal. And keeping your eye on that and concentrating, like in the Indian tradition, it's all about concentrating on the center of the things that are the most valuable, most important, and always being on the lookout for it. It's not like it is presenting, it's not as real to you as the thing right next to you. You have to do something internally to generate that purpose, and you have to hold to it in order to do that. So beautiful. Thank you, Harold, and great question, Maritza. Next up is Austin, Becky, and Richard. Austin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Shrikant. Thank you, Harold. It was a lovely talk. Thanks for putting it together. Wow, everyone's questions really super great too. Yeah, from Polly to Genj Tang. Yeah, after school, you kind of are left to kind of pick up the pieces of your own intellectual pursuits, and where we'd say, yeah, what are we going to do about this? Everyone is just drifting, and it's yeah, Harold, it was really great for you to check David Foster Wallace. I actually have that "This Is Water" little tattoo I got about a decade ago when I was an undergrad. Yeah, I know. So a profound message. And yeah, just to provide a little bit of overview, because I'm going at this at an angle. I studied writing and I studied language, and I became obsessed with words. And my kind of philosophy was, if you could grasp the essence of everything, then you can name it correctly. But that led me into a fascination with larger systems of critical thinking. And like, I'll just throw out Wittgenstein: limits of my language are the limits of my world. And so the expression of concepts became paramount in my own trajectory as a professional, which led me into a number of jobs that have most recently seen a kind of penultimate point in technology. And I do believe that between the humanities and technology, we're really going to have to edge closer to a wider conception and understanding of design and meaning. And I think you spoke very eloquently about all this. And I apologize, maybe I've just been in the professional world too long, and I'm some kind of unholy mix of businessman and creative at this point. But it's really great to hear from very, very smart people. And I just so then thanks for letting me have my spiel. But what to you might the future hold for these wider conceptions or the meanings of design?
Yeah. So that's a great question, and it deals with a kind of a central piece. And I engage with people a lot about this. They'll ask, like, if you had a conference and the president of the Association of Internet Designers or something will say, where will we be in 10 years? And my question is, where do you want to be in 10 years? You're not trying to guess where you're going to be. And I got a bit of, I don't know, felt really good the other day. Barron's, of all the places, had a headline saying, what future do we want to bring into existence? Because every place else you read and surveyed, that they were all saying, what's going to happen? The Economist, what's going to happen? These are the trends. This is what, how are we going to know all the future stuff? And that was the first time I'd seen a business magazine journal ask the right question. What do we want to bring into existence? So the question to myself, the challenge to myself and my colleagues and whoever I can drag along, is that we want to bring this into existence. We want education for some people, not everybody, for some people to be different. We want people to think differently. We need it. So what do we do to make that happen? So you're very sort of intentional about making something happen, rather than sort of following the trend and trying to guess what's going to happen and who's going to get in your way and things like that. It's like, no, we want this. And it's like, as an architect, somebody says to you, I want that kind of building. So you figure out how you make that kind of building appear in the world. And it's very complicated, and a lot of people are involved in everything, but it can be done. It's done all the time. maybe for the wrong reasons and all the other stuff. But I think that's the challenge for my colleagues and I, is like to stay and get as many people to go along with it, saying, what do we want to bring into existence? What do we want to see? We want to see systemic design playing a part in what people are doing. People need to think about what they do. That's a good thing, not split it up. So what do we do to make this happen? And so that's the kind of the design approach. It's like advancing into the future, navigating, having guides, going, getting there and seeing what outcomes will appear. So there's a million different futures for us. It's not, our futures aren't determinate. This is where I get into some conversations with my science friends, and that is, for them, the world is deterministic. If I know the formulas, I can tell you the state of the world at any time. If I know what's going on in this state and I have the formulas for it, everything, it's deterministic. No, it's not. And that one of the bottom turtles that you have to buy into is that there's free will, design will, that the outcomes are indeterminate. It's up to us to pick what it is we think is desirable and to make that happen. And so that's not trying to avoid what you're saying, but just, you know, taking it from a bit different perspective. And then what I would say, what I would want to see in the future is a very successful, and it doesn't have to be brick and mortar, or it doesn't have to be any of that sort of thing. It can be like the Berkeley bubble. It's just an influence that is instantiated in different ways and has these different ways of showing itself for this paradigm that's pressing for expression, and how we reify it. That's what I think that we're all about. Sounds a little bit maybe like a religious movement or something, but anyway, science did it, so why can't we?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Harold. I couldn't agree more. Next up is Becky, Richard, and Mike. Becky.
I really liked Maritza's question about unlearning, and would it be correct to say that perhaps experiencing reality at such a different way from the norm would be a way to shock someone out of their typical thinking, in order to go from experiencing the real to questioning the true, and then having them experience that recognition of water, of here are my assumptions, here are my world's views. And then from that recognition, being able to then transform it so that that unlearning process can begin. Would that be like a fair way to say it, or or view
Fair
it?
enough. It's fair enough. It's a good question. And I always have to stop myself from grabbing somebody and saying, snap out of it. Come on, snap out of it. That's not appropriate. So anyway, I have found and developed ways of helping people see things differently from a systemic design perspective, just little exercises in master classes and that. So one of my favorite ones, at least when I was still able to fly around and meet with people before the virus, is there's this little clay that you can buy that the kids have, different colored chunks of clay. So I would have some of that at this master class, and I would tell people, okay, you're going to switch off now. You're going to be a client and a designer, and then you're going to switch back and be client designer in the other way. And what I want you to do is I want you as the client to tell your designer something in your life that you really want to mark, that you want to remember, that you want to have a way of being reminded of. And they would do that. And then they said, okay, go pick up the different pieces of clay, whatever color you want. And now I want you to do a little model of what you would do to create something physical that would create a memory for this person to remind them. And of course, the clay was the kind where if you bake it, it becomes permanent. So overnight, the next day, they would come in and they would bring what they had done. The designers would bring in what they had done and then present that to their client. Oh, it was amazing, the emotional levels that people reached with that for both the designers and for the clients about, you heard me. And I never would have imagined that that's what it could have been, but you imagined it. And years later, people who had gone through this with me still have it. And they tell me, I still have that from the class that person had done, and it becomes precious. Well, both as a client and as a designer, you experience something at a level that you probably hadn't experienced before, because we don't often get to act as either clients or designers for people directly. You know, we may do a product that some poor schmuck's going to buy down there 6 months from now and, you know, be junk, and we don't know who they are, all that. This was a one-to-one, was an encounter, emotional, feeling. It really counted. And it's been an incredibly successful small exercise that could take place over a couple of days and change people. I mean, it really, really changed them, how they thought, what, you know, who they were as both clients, being able to express what they wanted, because you don't usually get to do that. And as a designer, where you say, okay, this is what I've heard, and I'm going to then tell you, this is what I think is a good solution composition for you. It was amazing. Just, I mean, it hardly ever didn't work out well. I mean, if somebody forgot to put it in the oven or something and it broke, that was very, very seldom. But you learn a lot about material and responsibility and accountability, even with a failure like that. It's like, okay, you really can't not pay attention. So anyway, that's one way of doing it. And there's a series of exercises that you can develop over a period of time, and they can be longer, over a longer period of time. Like in that one graduate program I told you, one of the things was required was the student was required to work with a cohort as a designer, which meant peers and things like that. But they had to go out of the university and get a client, a real world client to work with. Ugh. Instead of blowing off the professor or whatever, you know, they didn't, I mean, that client put the fear of God in, and they were so concerned about serving that client that things were done on time, things were done well. I mean, none of the stuff that you usually face as a professor or something, you know, I'm a dog ate the homework. No. This is real, kind of a real world piece. So you have those exercises where you can simulate for somebody, this is what it's going to be like. And they learn so much from that. And it's embodied then. I mean, they get the feeling. It's like, you know, in school, it's kind of this adversarial piece with the professor and what I can get away with. And there you have a client, real world client. This is kidding around in, which, like Shrikant said, this is serious. No more joking, no more tricks, no more sliding by. This person's looking me in the eye, and this is what they want, and this is what I have to do. That's a huge learning experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, so
Oh,
it sounds like
mm.
it's like it's recognizing your own assumptions and beliefs, but then being able to step beyond for that design process to happen is to see it through the other person, through the client's perspective and their worldview, their assumptions, their beliefs, and create that merging for the expected unexpected.
Yep.
I have one more question. Is that all right?
Please go ahead.
It was around technology, because you had mentioned like the paradigm shift and
Becky,
that's-
can I do one thing? I just want to
Yeah.
comment on this point
okay,
because
sure.
I have always loved this example of Harold. You know, ever since even after the first time he told me about it, I was completely blown away. And I've been thinking about it. You know, why does it work? You know, we're talking about drifting and a cure to drifting. One of the cures here is actually looking at another person, like actually trying to see who is this person in a very open way. Because the way in which drifting mind works is that you're just feeding yourself what you have. You're not really engaging with another person and actually being open to another person. Actually listening to another person can be transformative if you're honestly trying to say, who are they? What are they saying? That itself is a very powerful thing. And then on the top of that, you are trying to tell them what you see. And you're doing that through transforming something physical, which is objectively can be seen by them. That loop, it is the I-thou idea. What happens is that all the surface things that you normally pay attention to kind of melt away because you're trying to, with a very definite intention, trying to look at the core of the other person and say, who are they? What do they really want? And then you are expressing it. And in that expression, you are showing them who you are and what you understand of them. So what is created is something which is a union of the two. The yes and, this and that, an intersection, which both parties can say, aha. And so it's a recognition of something deep in the other person by you and by the other person of something deep in you. And I think that's why it just works so beautifully. So just I'm always blown away when you talk of that. Becky, go ahead. Sorry about the interruption.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you. So the question I had was really more around, well, in the context of like technology and the paradigm shift. Like, I think because it's so new, many of the big players a decade ago really didn't anticipate on certain things. And now we see, as you had mentioned, all the design with social media and studying how the brain works and making these products that are highly addictive, having prioritized profit over people. Like only I want to say like the really big tech experts were doing these kind of things, or maybe the government too, but like for us who are coming into the tech world and really more of the users, we don't have that level of expertise, but yet we can't escape. This is the world that we're living in. We have to work with it. And when you had put up the chart with like, the routine expert, it's like, we know how to use it, but I don't know if many of us would even say that we're experts in understanding like the complexity of the technology that we're using. And then now what we see often is like we're in that reacting phase because of our like somewhat mastery of the routine. And you said it's like the shiny object. Everyone's rushing to play with the shiny object. And now it's like in the world of innovation, the catchphrase is fail fast and pivot. It's the dilettante kind of approach. And it's like, is that really what you want to be doing with something you're not familiar with? And what are the consequences? So I guess the question is like, we can't get away from technology. It's really hard to get to the point of being like like they're not that they don't exist, but there aren't that many polymaths out there familiar with both like what the clients want on the business end, as well as like understanding the technology on the more technical end and marrying them together. So what are some practical ways of this brainstorming or preparing to minimize the unintentional consequences when designing with technology? Because everyone's trying to do it. Like no, everyone thinks like, okay, technology is the future, but how do we do it in a very thoughtful way so we're not just failing everywhere and pivoting like that is the gold standard?
Good questions. There were several of them in there, so they are good questions. The thing, I mean, that I keep reminding myself and others about is that we are lame gods in the service of prosthetic gods. And people, as designers, we're limited in what we know and what we can do. We're just limited. It's like Hephaestus, the blacksmith god in the Greeks tradition. He was lame. He couldn't do everything the other gods could do. But the other gods didn't have the ability to make things like he did, beautiful things. So they would have him do things for them to make beautiful things. So he was the kind of prototype designer. He was limited in what he could do, but he had this incredible power that he had for these other people. And I think it was Jung or Freud, one of them talked about we are prosthetic gods. We like to put stuff on to extend ourselves. We just need it. We need to be able to go faster, and we need to be, hear better. And we need to be, we just need that. So we're in this relationship of we're limited in what we can do as designers, what we can know, how we can know what's going to happen, how to do it. And here is the prosthetic god just needing more stuff. I want more stuff, more service, more product. I have to be more than I am. I can't be who I was when I came in the world. I need to have a lot more. So there's that kind of dynamic going. And there's some now, I mean, the choice for designers, I mean, it's there. It's like in Stanford. I don't know if it's still the case, but there was the case that was for AI and for robotics, and that there's two different schools. One was that we were here to replace humans, and one is that we're here to augment humans. That's a choice. And people would make that the most popular class at Stanford at one time, it might still be, is how to control behavior in people, because what you want to do is make them buy stuff that you create or services. So, I mean, that was the most popular class at Stanford for these high-tech people. So anyway, it's a choice that we have about who we serve and how we serve them. We may be limited in our ability to know the best and the best, but it's our choice as designers to decide who we're going to serve. And there's also another movement now in the high-tech area of the mythic figure, the half horse, half person, half man. That is how people are saying, maybe technology can be like this. Maybe we can take the best of what's human and we take the best of what's this powerful process and we can combine them and they become something, together. So the way that I see it is that, and thank you guys are lucky I don't have my slide with me or you'd be in trouble. And this was the degrees of freedom. Like we design systems with different degrees of freedom so that we can design systems that can pick and choose their targets. They can pick and choose their means. They can pick and choose their objectives. They can pick and choose all these things. Well, there's some of those things, those degrees of freedom that AI, for instance, can do. They can do better than we can. They're faster, crunch numbers better. So by picking the most optimal path to an objective, maybe something they can do that you can let them do. But at another level, further up in degrees of freedom, they can't. They can't do that because that's human volition. That's human intention. That's all those, like, what direction do you want your life to go in? What do you want your life to be? Things like that. Machines can't do it. So they shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be assigned any kind of level of importance, just very minor supporting roles. However, at the other ones, at the lower levels, limited degrees of freedom levels, they can do things faster than you can. Yeah, they can calculate, they can do all those things that may be very good. So you can be really paired with technology at that level and it's good. But at some level, you have to be a human. You have to take responsibility for those things, those degrees of freedom that only you can do and be responsible for. And it's kind of a systems thing. It's not simplistic, and people like simple ideas. They like simple solutions. They don't like to hear about, but with all these contingencies and these other things, and they don't like that. They like the silver bullet. They like the easy answer, the trick. What's the trick? Yeah, I know all that stuff. What's the trick? And it's hard. It's hard to get business people to pay attention to it. People in government, it's just difficult because people like certitude. They like to have the answer. Give me the recipe. Give me a recipe. Give me a schema that I can count on. And I mean, you will not go broke as a consultant or advisor or anything else, giving people the answer that they can follow, whether it's right or wrong. You'll make money. But if you come in and say, it's more difficult than that. You've got to do this and you've got to take responsibility. No, we don't think we want to hire you. We want somebody. That's what consultants do, is they bring in usually somebody else's answer, but they bring in an answer and they give you the answer. They don't give you hard questions or make you go through things or do stuff. It is much more complex, but I think there's ways to understand it and appreciate. There's schemas we can use, guide us to navigate through this. And for AI, and that we absolutely need to, because people are turning over degrees of freedom to AI that they should not have. And they're just giving up, or we're being sold by someone who wants to sell the AI. Yeah, it can do all those things. And it can't. It shouldn't. It can that. Yeah, it can do that.
Thank you.
By the way,
Yes.
they just shut down all the airports a day ago or something like that because of a computer glitch. And I think about that a lot. What if I'm on a spaceship on my way to Mars and there's a computer glitch? What am I going to do? No, there's certain things that you need to be in control of.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Harold. The best idea, I love your characterization of prosthetic gods, where you're enhancing certain capability. The person who is taught, that I really love, his thought on this is Marshall McLuhan. He says that all technology has 4 effects. all technology enhances something, and that enhancement is there in your focal awareness that you're focused on, that's what you get. But in the process, it obsoletes something, and you don't notice it as much. In the process, it also reverses in the sense that due to excess of that enhancement, it's going to produce some unintended consequences, which are going to be really bad, but they're going to be in background and you're not going to be focused on that. And the fourth one is actually the most profound. It says all technology is based on retrieval of something. So what you need is that you need to retrieve. So I think we are in the need of retrieval of the human, retrieval of the deepest part of us. And we have let that be replaced or obsolete, because the focus, you're talking about the attention is focused. It is there, but it has kind of been put in the background. And for the next thing, I think you have to start with the retrieval, which is the fourth part, which is like the beginning of saying, okay, so in that sense, what you're doing is a retrieval of something that is very old. Like the idea of Sophia, you're retrieving the idea and say, okay, what does that mean now in today's context? Fully enhanced. What does it look like? So, so thank you. Next up is going to be Richard. Richard, go ahead.
Oh, yes. And thank you for that presentation. And anytime there's systems sort of topics on, I'm interested in it. My question, I'm going to kind of pose the question first and then give you a bit of context, but before you answer. But the question really is, how or in what sort of ways does your systemic design overlap with Fuller's design science, or and his use of holistic models and systems? And the reason I ask that in some respects is that I'm a retired social work professor at the University of Calgary, and I spent about 20 years or almost 30 years carrying around a tetrahedron and trying to introduce holistic systems thinking into my field. One of the interesting things about that is that when I talk with former students now who have been out in the field for years and ask them who they remember about professors or courses, they seldom remember any real specifics, but they always say they remember the tetrahedron. So I think in some ways it's a little bit like your clay modeling, that they remember something. I spent also all of my years being vilified with another colleague for using social R&D research instead of bench research or program evaluation research, which is what the university wanted us to do along the teaching, research, community service that you talked about. 30 years later, though, the university and we developed a social enterprise company to do work in suicide prevention. Now the university is entirely embracing the idea of social entrepreneurship and wanting faculties and departments to find ways in which they can bring into the practical world a good invention or a good idea or something that would be beneficial to humanity. So things can change. But just going, oh, and one thing you said about the astronauts and how it changed their lives. One thing that has not changed for a lot of astronauts is their understanding of flat Earth and spherical Earth. Because I've heard conversations between astronauts and NASA ground crew talking to each other about what's it like up there. And the astronauts saying, I'm looking down and wondering how things are going in Houston today. So it's really interesting how difficult it is to change away from a default position, even when you're out in space and having the change impact that you mentioned. It's still very hard to talk about what's it like in there or what's it like out there in terms of out and in versus up and down. Anyway, I've just I'd like to know a little bit more about the connection with your work and the work of Fuller and design science and systemic science as you've been talking to us about tonight.
Okay, so I did get to meet Bucky for several hours on the stage. I know him well from there. So this is from a systems design perspective. This is how I look at Bucky's work and that area, and he does an incredible job of creating descriptions and explanations of the world. Does an incredible job. But like I said, description and explanation doesn't prescribe action. And that was the thing where Bucky sort of was the bridge between description and explanation, where he would say, this is what it looks like, therefore you should do this. And so that's where people have a hard time. And they say, wait a minute, that's not what I want to do, or why would I want to do that? They want to argue back a little bit. So, I mean, the whole piece that you're describing, even with the universities and that the shift with this particular approach is research is one form of inquiry. It's not the only form of inquiry, and universities treat it as if it's the only form of inquiry there is. And like the big argument about whether social science is even a science or not is caught up in the notion of social science has a different form of inquiry from physics or chemistry, for instance. And research isn't the only form of inquiry, especially for designers. We have to make assessments, we have to do search, which is an incredible form of inquiry, and we have to do action, and we have to inquire in action. So there's different kinds of inquiry. I know when I was still traveling around, I would go to other universities over in Scandinavia and other places and talk to the PhD students, and they would pretty much tell me, you know, what I want to do is I would like to create a new educational system. What I have to do is research, but I don't want to do research. I want to do something. I want to make a new educational system, and they can't do it with the model of research that's in place. It just, there's no link. And I would get them in trouble, but what I would have them do is instead of doing research, why don't you design a schema for guiding design of designs of educational systems? And they would do that, and they would present it to their peers. And that was the most satisfying thing that they got to do. And the dissatisfaction of going, collecting data, doing all those things that you have to do for research, and all that stuff is important. Somebody needs to be doing it. But for designers, if you want to do a new health system, if you want to do a new educational system, collecting data is not going to do it. Design is a different piece. It's dependent on good data. It's dependent on good science, all that sort of thing, but it's a different sort of thing. So I guess that's one of the big distinctions. It's like Bucky is superb at giving an image of a reality, especially mathematics, and that is profound. So how does a polymath take that information and connect it to other things so that there's action involved without him saying what he would do to take action that you need to do, which doesn't work with people. I mean, it's like the whole global warming thing. Scientists are inundating us with data and facts about warming, and here's the temperature, and here's everything now. And they'll sit and do that, and then they'll say, therefore, what you need to do, and people will say, wait a minute, you're not being a scientist now, you're being somebody that's a proponent for something, but it's not science. You're not doing the good science. So you can't say what we should do any more than anybody else. without agency. You need agency. And scientists will assume, because they have the data and the facts of certain kinds, may be filtered and all that, but it's a lot of data, a lot of information. They'll assume agency. And they'll say, therefore, we ought to, and people even instinctively are saying, wait. You don't have agency for that. And that's a lot of the blowback, I think, nowadays for people who are saying, being charged as being anti-science or something. I think what they're just concerned about is that a scientist doesn't necessarily have the agency to say how we ought to live our life, what's valuable. They can say what it is, and they can describe and explain it, but they can't say what's valuable, what has meaning. You need other people to do that. You need people from spiritual traditions, or you need systemic designers or somebody like that who needs to be able to help in relationship with clients to say what has meaning, how does it look, all the rest of that stuff. So that's one of the distinctions from a
Excellent.
systemic design perspective. And don't tell Bucky I said that.
Yeah, I won't. I just finally, this is a question on many people's mind. They have not asked it, but I'm sure we would love to have your new book come out so we can start reading it together. So do you have an update on that? Because it will also help you with the new school. So
Yeah.
what's the news on that?
It just needs to get done. It's in progress. I've done a lot of things, even like this, getting ready for this interview helped me clarify things that I was writing about. And I've got these articles and things that I have done that would be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all helped. It's made it great. I just need now the time, and I've got the center and the school and my master classes and all these other, and people will pop in and say, why don't you do an article for this journal or something? And I don't say no. So the book sits there and simmers and sort of glares at me and saying, you're not paying attention to me anymore. Do you not like me anymore? I mean, it's like, no, I'll be back. Trust me. I'll be home on time. Trust me, I'll be there. No, that's where, but it's much better. I mean, what was going to be like 2 or 3 books, I've agreed with myself that it ought to be one book now.
Can you briefly tell us what the book is going to be about? And then that'll be a close. So I want people to be expecting the book. I want people to be thinking in that direction. Go ahead.
So the working title is The Design Mind. So our ability to design evidently started before we became modern humans. And we have artifacts of design that they find all the time. Now, some scientists have said, well, we have monkeys in Brazil that's been making tools. So we were before even the proto-humans that was designed. The design mind was in play. So it's not that it's going to be all about archaeology, paleontology or anything. It's just, again, like this design mind has been with us evolving, and it's sort of drawing us into the future. So why do we continually try to advance and improve and do things? It's because this design mind is pulling us into this future, and it's evolving, and we don't know what it is fully. Like, we don't know what design is really fully. We ask the question, what do we want it to be? What do we want the design mind to be able to do? So it's sort of laying out what, I mean, I have this notion of systemic design was going to be one of the books, and then there was going to be deep design, and then there was going to be broad design or wide design. So I'm going to put those all together, because like deep design is when we design from the core, and what does that look like? It's not deep diving in the shallow end of the pool, which is what a lot of the material design nowadays is. It's like, so you have systemic and you have deep, and then broad is like when we start to sweep things in, which kind of ties to what you're all looking to with this comprehensiveness, is when we start sweeping in ways of thinking, what we've thought about, not in necessarily categories or anything, but just ability to begin to sweep in other traditions of thinking, other ideas. And it's kind of the polymath looking at this. How do you do that? How do you handle that overwhelming amount of information? How do you pick and choose? What's foreground, background? What's all of that? So those like are the three. Well, there's the first one is the design mind as a kind of a metaphor, and not really a metaphor, as a reality that we have, and we don't know what it is. And it was here long before we became modern. And, it's driven our evolution in a lot of ways. I mean, we've adapted and things, but we've certainly done things that we've had to adapt to that's become real. So those are the 4 areas so far. And I've got tons. Anybody wants to help? I've got tons of stuff that's just waiting there. My wife keeps saying, when are you going to do something with all this crap? It's got to go someplace.
Wonderful. Harold, this is a special treat. I mean, just thank you so much for coming on. If you want to have, I will give you the last word. Anything you want to say, go ahead.
Well, I just want to thank everybody that showed up, old friends and the mix from the people I met before and people from Australia and everybody.
Let me interrupt you for a second. There is one very important person who wants to say something. Anne, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
It's too. Can you speak into the mic? We can barely hear you. Oh, just a second. Hold on. Yes, go ahead.
He made a statement and he said that politicians should take this course. I happen to have the opportunity to present this to our newly elected governor. He is Republican. He is a multimillionaire from the artificial intelligence world, computers. I would like to ask everyone here to give me a suggestion as to how I should bring this school and present it to this man. I will have a very short time. I might have 15 minutes. How can I make that presentation?
Okay. Anybody has any suggestions? Go ahead. How do you make this presentation? Go ahead and type a exclamation mark. Would love to hear from anybody who has any ideas. Let's start with Zheng. Zheng, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I think maybe you can start with the politician always want to make a difference. Like if you want to, what difference you want to make? Maybe this design thinking will help you to make it happen. So I found this tremendously helped me in different things. Maybe you can, I found this tremendously helpful for you to make any changes with this, whatever they want to do with the government, the society.
Wonderful.
Great idea. Great idea, Cheng. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, what do you think we can do?
Well, the important thing, takeaway that I got out of this presentation is you started this out by crediting Churchman. And Churchman did a lot of things, including, besides operations, research, and design, he said everything is design. And even Noam Chomsky and the Salt Talks people credited Churchman with their model. And the system, the key point of this is feedback. Whether you're trying to cook an egg for breakfast in the morning, or drive a car or fly a jet or land a jet in the Hudson River like Sully did. You build a little model in your mind and you adjust the reality and your parameters until the two match.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That's how AGI, how artificial intelligence works.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Let's do, I want people to answer Anne's questions. Becky, go ahead.
I would say that that whatever policies that this governor is going to create would really accentuate human agency, bringing back the values of the person, enabling or empowering the person to be more by removing obstacles that either take away time or hurt. So, or return to the core of the human.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky. Next up is Sanjay, followed by Maritza. Sanjay.
Yes, I wanted to just address the question that that Anne asked. So I think, I mean, one thing, and you mentioned he has a background in artificial intelligence, so I think that will help. I think I agree with what Becky just said about policy. I think this is an important part of this that I think, and again, you said you have just 15 minutes, so it will be difficult to express this idea, but the idea is that most experts in the field consider that AI at some point will become competitive with humanity. And that's a lot of where people are considering the threat to humanity from AI. So introduce this idea to him that he needs to guide and possibly set policies in government that will help people to recognize how to work with AI and not make ourselves, meaning not make humanity, be a threat to AI. I think that's very important because ultimately, any two systems that are in conflict or competition, they look at where their threats come from. So if we can identify and minimize the threats that we, humanity, pose, I think that'll help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. Next up is Maritza.
Hi. First thought, I have two ideas for different approaches. The first would be to speak to his desiderata. So if we know what is his desires, and then you bring up the the design flight school from that perspective, like the wrapper is already it's going to be waved in using things that he desire, and from an idea maybe a little bit less ephemeral. This is a politician, right? So you start by telling him that this is his idea. He wants to be the governor who puts his foot forward intentionally. And because he wants to do this, this is the path for him. And that's where you give him a little blurb about the school.
Thank you, Maritza.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Anne. I hope. I mean, I like many things many people said. I think you really need to understand him and see what his values are and present it in that light of saying how it will. Because the thing is that design is something that everybody needs, including him. So what would design do for him? So I think understanding his values, where he's coming from, and then presenting it that way, I think that seems to be that to me seems to be a good way of proceeding. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
All right, Harold, go ahead, please. Concluding remarks.
So, just very quickly and briefly, what I would like from everybody is sort of be thinking about some of these ideas and to imagine if you would want to be a part of the academy, the institute, the school, if you have good ideas or anything, I would love to hear about those. And we are getting to a place, like the advisors and people are pushing us to make presentations, begin to make skills. So if anybody has ideas, networks, anything like that, would really be helpful. We just need, I guess, more people at the barricades, as was mentioned. We need more people at the front championing it, not even necessarily needing to take on courses or students or anything like that, but just feels that it's a great idea. It needs a lot more obvious refinement as we pull the team together of people that would be the staff, and that will be doing the particulars, then the prescriptive work. So there's a lot more work to do, but I think it's about time to get started. The master's classes and that are all, they've been running for a while, or we just do those sort of things, get suggestions, spread the word. That'll all be very helpful. And it's just like, I think it's time. It's hopefully a tipping point is going to be coming up, and somebody's going to say, hey, what we gave to MIT was nothing. What we're going to give to you is.
So Harold, couple of things. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
You can get me at Nelson Group at cal.berkeley.edu.
Marissa, could you type it in chat? Okay, so that was one thing. And second thing is that, we at 52 Living Ideas just love your work, love everything that you do. So if there is anything that we can do, we are happy to do that.
Good.
If you can,
Yeah.
think of anything that we can do, we would love to do that. Because what happens is that what's that?
So careful leaving the door open for me.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. And the other thing is that the beautiful thing here is that we have you have the YouTube. So what happens is everything kind of gets there, and you can use it, pieces of it wherever you want. And many people will find out about it. It's a kind of a parallel way. And we are doing this large project on Bucky that is attracting a whole bunch of kind of designers and all kinds of people in all kinds of areas. And we're kind of committed to comprehensivity, and your way of thinking and kind of way of thinking of most people here, it meshes very well. So I think there is a lot of synergy here. So, we look forward to doing whatever it is that we can. So if you can think of anything that we can do, just reach out to us, and we'll be happy to do that. So, so this is so good. Harold, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And I hear Anne asking you to go do some shoveling of snow. I hear.
I think she just took my coat out. I'm not sure.
All right, folks. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate everybody. I just loved all the comments and all the questions. I think, every time I feel this has been, Harold, we've finished more than almost like 1,200 meetups since COVID started. And we're still doing at the rate of about 10 per week. So this kind of level, you end up learning so much just by this interaction, and just, amazing people just show up, and we have, it's so good. So thank you very much.
You have youth on your side.
Yes.
I couldn't do that many meetups in a week. I couldn't.
Well, you are
And my
very
book at the same time.
you have managed to remain young at heart
Yeah.
throughout, and that is probably the much greater achievement, because youth have youth without doing anything. And to remain young at heart, that is the real achievement. So thank you very much. See you soon, folks. Bye.
It's the
Bye.
people I hang out with.
That's true. That's true. Thank you, Anne. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
All for your support.
Bye-bye.
Bye.